I was actually looking at the standings last night because I watched them get mauled last night, and I'm like, man, they're only like 2 to 3 games from eighth place. So are they in trouble? Yes, they're in trouble. But they do have a really huge advantage. With no fans in the building, even if they start the first round of the playoffs on the road, it won't be like the old home court advantage. They could drop to 6, 7, maybe even 8th in the next in 2 weeks. But because there's no home court advantage, it really doesn't matter. As long as AD and Anthony are healthy when the playoffs start, they're still going to be a tough out. But to answer your question, they are in trouble. They're not going to stay. I think they're third or fourth right now. They're going to be they're probably not going to win a game in the next couple of weeks. I haven't seen the schedule, but without AD and LeBron, it's going to be hard for them to win any games.
Yeah, to your point, they are 2 losses in front of being the 7th seed right now, and it's going to be a while before they come back. But then let me change the question. If LeBron and Anthony Davis are healthy, and that's a huge if, but if they are healthy when the playoffs begin, will they be your pick to win the championship?
They will not be.
No.
Listen, I am sold on the Utah Jazz and the Clippers, but this is going to be a totally different fight for them this year because they're going to have a tough round no matter who they play in the West. If you play Luka Doncic in the first round, that's a heck of a series. Listen, if you play the Portland Trail Blazers, that's a heck of a series. But they won't be my pick. I'm probably going to stick with the Jazz, to be honest with you, because they've been the most consistent team throughout the season. But I tell you what, the East, between Brooklyn, Philly, and the Bucks, those 3 teams, they're going to be interesting to watch who's going to be the best team in the East.
Greeny presented by Progressive Insurance. Charles Barkley with me on the Goodyear Hotline. Let's talk about Brooklyn, because they have been doing what they've been doing and basically have barely at all had their big 3 on the floor together. And I suppose there is no guarantee that they will. But I'll ask you a similar question to what I said in the West. If we get to the playoffs and Kyrie, KD, and Harden are all healthy and they're all playing, what will be your expectation for them?
They should win the championship. If they're all healthy, Brooklyn's going to be the favorite. I will tell you this, though. I hear all these guys talking about MVP. At one point, it was Joel Embiid. At one point, it was LeBron. I think Chris Paul should be in the conversation. But the MVP in the NBA right now is James Harden. What he's doing right now without KD and without Kyrie, we can't ignore that. James Harden is the MVP of the NBA, plain and simple. Like I say, Embiid had it for a minute. LeBron's been right there. I talk about Chris Paul, what he's doing in Phoenix, but the MVP in the NBA right now is James Harden.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think when you look not only at doing it without those guys, but the way he has adapted what he does, he is the most unique, among the most unique players in the NBA, and he's been doing it that way in Houston for such a long time. And he comes to Brooklyn, and it feels like he has been willing to be exactly what they need him to be. And Charles, you know as well as anyone, superstars aren't always willing to do that, and Harden has been willing to do it. I've been impressed.
Well, let me say this. First of all, what James has done, he's not the same guy who played like he did in Houston. He don't play like that anymore, having a bunch of guys just stand around and watch him go one-on-one. To me, he's played like a real point guard. And the game, he obviously hasn't had KD, but when Kyrie is there, he makes Kyrie better. But, man, when he's not there, even last night against Portland, I was watching that game last night. I'm like, I didn't think they could win that game last night. And I know you guys got him on TV tonight against the Jazz. Listen, if he go into Utah and win tonight, that to me, if he don't get MVP after that, people are just being biased. Listen, he did not handle the situation well coming out of Houston. He quit on those Rockets. But you know what? Hey, he made a mistake. He apologized for it. But what he's doing in Brooklyn right now cannot be overlooked, and we should appreciate it because, listen, this guy, and I know I'm going to probably get criticized for saying this guy might be the best basketball player in the world. I mean, he might be the best player in the world. I've always thought he was the best offensive player. He wasn't as great as Michael and Kobe, but I said a few years ago, and people laughed at me, he's the best offensive player I've ever seen.
Mm.
But right now, no disrespect to LeBron or Giannis or anybody, James Harden might be the best basketball player in the world. Period.
Wow, I was not expecting you to say that, and so I'm sitting here sort of trying to figure out how to respond to it. The criticism I would think would be that while I think he has been a little more of a willing defender this year and in recent years, that's what people would say, that the best players in the league do it that well on both sides of the floor. Charles, what would you say to someone who would say that to you?
Well, I think it's always listen. James has made some. I didn't. That style in Houston was never going to win, but he has
Yeah.
adapted and changed. I think he is a little bit better defensively.
Mm-hmm.
But for them to win games without KD and without Kyrie, you got to give that man some credit. And like I say, he is the most awesome offensive player I've ever seen. Listen, Michael and Kobe were better players from the guard standpoint, but as far as offensively, they couldn't shoot threes like him. They were not as great as dribbling the basketball, going to the basket, getting fouled. I mean, this guy, every time he goes to the basket, he's going to hit somebody and get 2 free throws. But we got to give that guy credit, man. He is an offensive machine, plain and simple. And some of the nights when Kyrie is going off, it's because of James.
What have been your overarching thoughts through the first couple of rounds of the NCAA tournament?
Well, I want to first give a shout out to ESPN. I was watching your guys' coverage and looking how many brackets you guys had. You had, last time I counted, you had like 11 million brackets. So it just tells me how much people really missed March Madness last year. That's the first thing. Secondly, in a one and done scenario, anything can happen. That's the beauty of this tournament. Like in the NBA, the best team always going to win a 4 out of 7 games. But in March Madness, one game, the best team does not always win. That being said, Greeny, man, it's going to be tough to beat the Zags. They are terrific. After looking at tape the last couple months, I thought that the Zags and Baylor were the 2 best teams. I have seen nothing to change my mind. Michigan is terrific. Alabama is terrific. But listen, I'd be totally shocked if it wasn't the Zags and Baylor in the finals.
Gonzaga, again, looking to be the first team since Bob Knight's Indiana team in '76 to go unbeaten the whole year and win the championship. Charles Barkley with me. So to your point about the, for lack of a better word, randomness of the tournament, which I fully agree with, I'm interested to hear your perspective on this. I went to school in the Big Ten. I love the Big Ten. The Big Ten has gotten annihilated in this tournament. They had 9 teams in, 8 of them are already out. Some will look at it and say that means that the conference was overrated. So if someone says that to you, Charles, what do you say?
I don't think it was overrated. Listen, it's a one and done scenario. Anything can happen. I mean, nobody picked North Texas to win. Nobody thought Loyola Chicago was going to win 2 games. They got a terrific coach. Coach Moser is a terrific coach. Mm-hmm. But listen, you throw all the regular season stuff out the window. One and done is really one and done. You just, listen, if Illinois played Loyola best of 7, they'd win that series. But they played, my man Krutwig, if you don't like watching him play basketball, you don't know anything about basketball. They're very well coached. And you knew after the first 10 minutes that game was over because the way they played, you're not going to come back on them. You got to get off to a good start because they're not going to help you. They're not going to make any mistakes.
The great Charles Barkley with me here on the Goodyear Hotline, celebrating March Deal Days with month-long service and savings. Visit GoodyearAutoservice.com for offers. And if you're wondering, have there been more upsets this year than usual? The answer is there have been more upsets than ever. It is right now the average seed is a 5.9. That's what the math is. It's like a 6 seed is still alive, which is the highest that number has ever been since they went to this format. So, Charles, there have been more upsets this year than any year before. Is that in any way based upon, do you think that the circumstances here, the pandemic and everything else, do you think that's part of the reason for that?
No, not real. Hey, listen, you talking about all those upsets. There's only been one number one seed that's gotten beat. All the big boys are still there.
Yeah.
I think that those schools, listen, the Oral Roberts, they've had the two best players on the court in both of their games. That's not an upset. If you have the two best players, just because people don't know who you are, that's not, we use the word upset. Or Roberts, Max Amos, and I forget the big guy's name right off the top of my head. They've had the two best players in both games they played. The one thing the one thing that's weird, people don't realize how many terrific, great basketball players there are because the only time we ever see these guys is for March Madness or their college or their regular season ending tournament. But listen, those two brothers in Eastern Washington, them boys were flat out balling. My man who had the Bill Walton look, he was out there smashing people. But Greeny, I think the problem is we only show the big time schools throughout the year. And we don't realize nobody know Max Amos is leading the country in scoring